Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Trans Stupid, where I take a look at the wonderful world of LGBTQIA+ news because stupidity is intersectional. So last week's video was a little bit different to what I normally do because I focused exclusively on one individual, and that of course is the tampon-loving troon of Canada, Jessica Yaniv, who's currently taking a high number of beauticians to court for refusing to wax their genitals. Now, since my video came out, the story has exploded with a lot of high-profile names, including Blair White, making videos on Jessica Yaniv and bringing their exploits to a whole new audience. This is absolutely fantastic. The more people who are talking about Jessica Yaniv, the less power this individual has to shut down any criticism aimed at them. This was one of my concerns when I made my Pillars of the Community video on Jessica Yaniv just a couple of months ago, where I was concerned that any kind of talk about this person would involve me even getting banned outright from YouTube. But at this point, there's so many of us talking that they have no power. Can't ban us all, after all. But there's a particular, more important benefit to having this whole narrative around Yaniv. Yes, Yaniv is an incredibly cringe-worthy individual. The stories that are coming out, some of them can sound quite hilarious, and it really brings us into what kind of clown world we're currently living in. But a couple of months ago when I did my Pillars of the Community video, one of the topics I touched upon was Yaniv's time when they were in close contact with a Canadian girl group called Cimarelli, and in particular, an individual who was the target of some of Yaniv's abuse called Louise. Now, Louise had mentioned that Yaniv had actually been sending sexually explicit messages to minors. At the time, this was just an accusation where, as much as a lot of us would probably think that this was something that was going on, there wasn't anything kind of concrete out there that was backing this. But because of the exposure towards Yaniv, some of these alleged victims, and I have to use alleged because obviously there is nothing that's been said that is concrete that Yaniv is a child predator, but that some of them have started to speak. And the post-millennial in particular reached out to one of them. A young woman has come forward with serious allegations of abuse against Jonathan Jessica Yaniv. Yaniv, a male-to-female transgender, has recently risen to infamy for the Human Rights Tribunal suits she has taken out against 16 estheticians for declining to perform waxing services on her male genitals. While the suits are ongoing, a publication ban on Yaniv's name and the content of her case and history was lifted during recent hearings, allowing details of her disturbing past behaviour to come to light. 20-year-old Jessica Rumpel of Sammamish, Washington State, has disclosed details to the Post-Millennial of her encounters with Jessica Yaniv. At the time, Rumpel was just 14 years old, almost turning 15. The Post-Millennial then shows some screenshots of various conversations that Rumpel was having with Yaniv. One where Yaniv is asking how old she is, where she says that she's 14. And then Yaniv kind of starts to indicate that, well, she's a little bit young and is not sure what they should be saying. Rumpel said, at first, I thought, this guy seems to have some sort of mental health issues. I don't think he was being a predator. Now, they made contact through ask.fm, which is the same website Yaniv was using to target Louise. That seems to be where a lot of the Cimarelli interactions went on. But then they moved over to a private messenger app called Kik, which I don't really use a lot. At all, in fact. But apparently it is known to law enforcement for having notoriously poor protection of children, and it's routinely used by pedophiles to message each other and their victims. According to Rumpel, Yaniv allegedly presented himself as a young male in his late 20s and claims that he used pictures of himself when he was younger in their initial conversation. She said it was sympathy that caused her to contact Yaniv initially, saying he seemed to make himself to be the victim. He actually told me he had folliculitis and depression. Pitying who she thought was an emotionally pained young man, Rumpel maintained some regular contact with Yaniv. And just like any other 15-year-old girl, she enjoyed having another friend to talk to, but then the conversation started to turn to a topic that anyone who has followed Yaniv must be expecting to have come about. She said, Yaniv always told me he uses pads and wants to go into ladies' bathrooms. He asked me how to go into the ladies' bathroom without being caught, and then how to be in the bathroom if there's a lot of women or girls. Yaniv even asked me what stall to go in. Now, this is a very typical conversation a lot of people have seen from Yaniv. In fact, one of the big controversies from last year was when Yaniv was messaging a wide variety of different women in various makeup groups, talking about the exact same topic of what do I do when I go into a bathroom and I'm on my period and there are girls and women in there. So Yaniv had been doing this allegedly since far before those messages came to light. And this shouldn't really surprise anyone if this is indeed true. So according to Rumpel, Yaniv didn't identify as transgender at any point during these interactions. And that's particularly interesting because Yaniv has been saying in court that they'd been identifying as such since the age of 6 because they were prancing around the house. And that's what girls do. They prance, apparently. Yaniv also sent photographs of them wearing women's jeans, asking whether it's weird that they do this. I mean, it's the weird thing is that you're sending this to a 14-year-old girl. That's the weird bit here. But then things apparently turned quite sexual. In a highly disturbing string of messages, Yaniv says, I'm so, oh my god. She questions it. They say, you know. She says, hungry? And then Yaniv says, it rhymes with that. And a little smiley face. That's terrifying. This is an adult who at the time would have been around 27, saying to a 14-year-old girl, they are so something rhyming with hungry. And then they follow up by saying, why are you always so beautiful? And then Rumpel asks, did you also ask of me if I had big tits and a big ass on Anon? Yaniv says no. She then says, oh, okay, cool. But then Yaniv says the first thing, yes. The second thing, no. So is Yaniv in this message indicating that they asked a 14-year-old girl if they had big tits? And there are plenty of these screenshots going around, but just one of the last ones that I want to comment on here is Yaniv saying, I can't wait till he turns 16. And even though Rumpel indicates that she's turning 15 soon, Yaniv is saying that they can't do anything with them. And then says, well, as you're not 16, and that means I can't do anything with you as much as you want that. Am I right? To which she says, no. Don't blame her, to be honest. But finally, I think one of the most disturbing parts of all this is a string of voice messages apparently sent by Yaniv, where they put on a Elmo voice.
Elmo loves the fuck. Elmo loves the dicky. Elmo loves sissy. Elmo loves the pussy. I love you too, Jess Wampa. I love you. You will be go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Take on me, Elmo. Ticka the Elmo, ticka, 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 ticka.
Just to clarify, this is a 27-year-old man sending a 14 turning 15-year-old girl messages saying that I don't even want to really repeat them. You've heard them, you heard it yourself. It's disgusting. Now, Rumpel is actually saying that the reason why she's bringing all this to light is because she's just become aware of what Yaniv is doing in the public eye. And this goes back to why I'm saying it's such a good thing that more high-profile people are finally talking about this. The bigger names you can get posting these messages, the more this person is going to be exposed, the more people can come forward, because I highly doubt Rumpel is the only person who's had these similar alleged experiences with Yaniv. Louise had mentioned in her string of tweets that there were multiple people, and this is I feel as though we're only on the tip of the iceberg. What's more, Rumpel has said that she has reported this to the police, and there might be others to follow suit. Now, when it comes to Yaniv's own court cases about waxing, naturally this isn't going to form a part of it, but Yaniv will be, we will not be getting the answer to the court cases for at least another 2-3 months. So I'll be sure to do more of an update then, and I am going to be doing more of a rolling update with Yaniv whenever new allegations come to light, because I've got a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more before we get those verdicts. But just one last thing that I don't think I've ever really kind of touched upon when it comes to Yaniv, which which I've always been meaning to, so I want to cross this off now, is Yaniv does appear to be quite racist themselves and has very anti-immigrant sentiments. Comments including, I can't stand them turban effers, like, you know, taking photographs of Arabic women wearing Arabic clothing, just finding it funny. Also, quite an interesting post from Yaniv from a few years ago, saying that they don't help people from Iraq. Now, considering you're going to a court case about how you shouldn't be able to be declined service for a Brazilian wax because you have a set of testicles, it's a bit interesting that you're refusing to help someone just because they are from a country that you don't like. Further messages include, I can't stand Asians, and saying about a particular Sikh person that their turban is on too tight, which affects the blood circulation to their brain. So Yaniv does have a history of making quite racially charged comments. It could in fact be one of the reasons why Yaniv is taking mostly Asian women to court with the ball waxing cases. So it is quite relevant to everything which is going on. It's just something which has always slipped my mind when discussing Yaniv, so I wanted to cross it off at this point. So moving away from Yaniv, there is a lot more going on in the amazing world of Trans Stupid, which doesn't involve that individual. But one of the first videos I did on the Rose of Dawn channel involved the UK's Gender Recognition Act and why I didn't think it needed to be changed. Now, it's been almost a year now since the consultation came to an end where the government asked whether it should be changed or not. And LGBT groups aren't happy with the lack of progress. LGBT groups and celebrities call for gender law reform. More than 100 LGBT organisations and celebrities are urging the government to reform UK gender identity laws, the BBC has learned. Following a public consultation which has had 100,000 responses, changes were promised, but the government has continually missed its own deadlines. The Government Equalities Office has insisted any potential reforms must be carefully planned, and they must have a positive impact on the trans community in the UK. But in a letter addressed to Boris Johnson, LGBT groups said the UK was lagging behind other countries in terms of legal equality for trans and non-binary people. The letter, seen by the BBC, has been signed by more than 100 charities, campaigners and activists, including Stonewall CEO Ruth Hunt, musicians Ollie Alexander and Jade Furwell, and professional victim Monroe Bergdorf. Ashley Talbot, a transgender woman, says the current process to get legal recognition is too negative, saying it's an extremely bureaucratic process. You have to gather years of evidence from employment records, identity documents and bank statements and send all that information to a panel who you don't actually meet. These people will then make a decision about whether you are trans enough to be covered by the law. I see absolutely no problem with a panel doing just this. It's not for people who know you and can vouch that you are this trans. You need to be able to demonstrate to people, effectively demonstrate to the state that you are who you say you are and that you are living such a life. And evidence is stuff you should have been keeping on for a number of years. For example, bank statements, employment slips. You can keep this information very easily, and especially in a digital age, a lot of this will be provided to you in email anyway. So having this info really isn't that much of a problem. And is it bureaucratic? Yes, but it should be. It shouldn't be a simple process. It shouldn't be a case of, I say I'm whamming, therefore I'm whamming, and therefore you get a whole new identity. You need to be able to show to people you are serious about who you are. And so collecting this information, I think, is a basic entry point to all this. Like, if you can't be bothered doing this, why should anyone take you seriously as to what gender you are? Ms. Talbot added that for any community to be required to prove something to a panel in order to be granted full rights would be an absolute outrage. She continued, "I know people who have had their application turned down because of a perceived fault with the evidence. They were so humiliated. The stress and the emotional toll that it takes on members of the community simply to have legal recognition is all extremely damaging." But trans activists have never exactly been clear as to what rights are being denied by not having the gender recognition certificate. In fact, quite a small number of trans people actually go out of their way to get one of these. You don't really need one. The most important things really for your identity would be getting the gender markers changed on passports, on driver's licenses. These are the ones that you use in your day-to-day lives. When it comes to the gender recognition certificate, it's more like 100% mark. It's something which you can have framed as like, I am officially women's now. It doesn't really change your day-to-day interactions at all. So whilst I can certainly see that it's nice to be able to get a letter from the state saying that they recognize you in such a way, not having that isn't stopping you from doing anything. Now, one person who thinks that the Gender Recognition Act really needs to change is Jamie Windust, an LGBT and non-binary activist who doesn't identify as a man or a woman, and looks interesting. Windust says, "Non-binary people like myself are not even given the option to change our gender identity through the GRA. This is not only invalidating, but having your own government not allowing you to just exist is really painful," said Windust in a high-profile publication that is funded in part through the government, who has also been able to get modelling contracts and have various videos done on them, is saying that they are not allowed to exist. If it is illegal for you to exist, you probably should be hiding yourself. I don't think you're doing a very good job of anonymity. But being serious, what the hell do you mean by you're not allowed to exist? You clearly are. You are a person who is able to do things. Not having a certificate saying this person is officially a they is not going to change your day-to-day life. I've got a feeling you roll around in a lot of queer communities where they will jump over themselves to validate you in whatever way you would like. So what difference does any of this really make to you? If not just a way of you being able to get yourself a platform to say, look how oppressed I am, as I have all cameras on me, as I'm able to approach so many different publications and have them put me in them at a moment's notice, to be a representative for a whole community, whether they want you to be or not. But yes, of course, you're not allowed to exist. The BBC goes on to say the consultation closed in October 2018, but the government has yet to respond. A response was promised by spring 2019 and then before Parliament's summer recess, but now an update is expected by the end of 2019. And they'll probably miss that because I think that there are bigger things going on right now that take precedent to whether or not an NB should be able to get a certificate from the government saying that they are officially NB. I don't want to repeat too much on what my own thoughts on Gender Recognition Act are. I've did a video on this quite a long time ago now, and my thoughts haven't really changed. But I don't think it needs to be changed, the Gender Recognition Act. I think it does everything just fine. And I think a lot of this is just a way of people being able to victimize themselves more by saying, without this piece of paper, I can't do anything. Well, if they can really identify exactly what it is that is stopping them from doing anything, I'd be interested in listening. But they never point this out. It's always just, we're not allowed to exist. The government is betraying us. It's discriminating against us. It's oppression. They don't have concentration camps, you know. You're not going to be thrown in jail for being NB. So maybe tone down the rhetoric a little bit. But the last thing that I want to touch on today is a recent report which is concerning, again, the topic of trans children. Now, as I keep saying in my videos, it's something which I do want to do a proper video on. I've just been very busy. But these topics, whenever they come up, I think it's always important to acknowledge them and basically what it is that they're saying. According to The Guardian, politicised trans groups put children at risk, says experts. Counsellors and other mental health providers fear being labelled transphobic. School counsellors and mental health service providers are bowing to pressures from highly politicised transgender groups to affirm children's beliefs that they were born the wrong sex, a leading expert has warned. Marcus Evans, a psychotherapist and ex-governor of the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, whose Gender Identity Development Service is the only NHS clinic to provide gender counselling and transitioning, said many experts were living in fear of being labelled transphobic, which is having an impact on their objectivity. I believe the trans political agenda has encroached on the clinical environment surrounding and within the Gender Identity Development Service, Evans told The Observer. Young people need an independent clinical service as the long-term interests of the patient at heart. To some extent, this requires a capacity to stand up to pressure coming from various sources, from the young person, their family, peer groups, online and social networking pressures, and from highly politicised pro-trans groups. The article also mentions someone by the name of Dagny, who is a woman who identified as a trans man, and says that she was influenced by views expressed on Tumblr. So this appears to be one of the first known cases we have of a Tumblrina actually coming out and saying the whole site was toxic and it pushed me to being trans, which a lot of us true scum have been saying was going to happen for years. She says, one of the unhealthy beliefs I held was the belief that if you have gender dysphoria, you must transition, and anyone that appeared to stand in my way was a transphobe, an alt-right bigot. Now, I do believe that trans activist groups are heavily undermining the work of gender identity clinics. The push to demedicalise gender dysphoria, the idea that everyone should kind of have access to medical treatments, whether or not they have that dysphoria, that every gender is valid, and to basically just push a agenda at this point, a belief that you just opt into this stuff, is having real-world impacts on many vulnerable people, and it's having impacts on the services which people like myself rely on. This was always going to be inevitable with the modern-day push of the trans activist movement. And this kind of thing is only going to get worse the more power they get, and we need more trans people speaking out in support of gender identity services, saying that they should be allowed to really be critical of whether that person has gender dysphoria, whether they should be transitioning or not. It should not be an open case of that person is trans, give them all the drugs that they need, when you don't even know if they have gender dysphoria. Because a lot of them seem to think that, well, if you say the wrong things, then that's them being mean. But no, these are professionals. They should be allowed to scrutinise everyone that comes through the door, and especially young people, because we're at the brink of a scandal here. And guess who's going to get the throwback in this? There's going to be people like me. I'm going to get blamed for this because everyone thinks in collective ways when it comes to trans stuff. And I don't want that. I don't want young people who don't have dysphoria having their lives turned upside down because of virtue signalling parents and a community that pushes itself into everyone's business. We need to be able to speak out against what the trans lobby is doing, that they don't speak on behalf of people like myself or many of the other transsexual people who watch these videos. We need to really show people that this is unacceptable and make sure that trans healthcare is not only at the top of our priority list, but it's something that is actually working properly, and it's there to catch out people who don't actually have gender dysphoria. But what are your thoughts on the topics I've covered today? Is there anything in particular I've missed out? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. A special thank you to all the new subscribers who've followed my channel since my last video came out. I genuinely wasn't expecting that jump in popularity. I'm not sure how all this happened, but I really, really appreciate it. I really do. I never thought a video of mine could ever reach upwards of 45,000 views. That's mad. That's absolutely mad. But thank you to all of you. Thank you for supporting me, for watching me. I really appreciate it. But if you're more than welcome to follow me on Twitter, or you can join my Discord below. And if you really like what I do, there is also options to support me on Patreon and Subscribestar. Thank you all again, and I'll see you all next time. And a special thank you to James, Prue, and the rest of my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar.